Okay, hello everybody. We start 1 minute early because we have a very full agenda. My name is Mia Kuleman, I'm the IAB chair,
I'm Mallory Noodle. I'm also on the IAB.
and this is the IAB open meeting. Okay, the IAB open meeting is a meeting hosted by the IAB, but we're still part of the IETF, and so the IETF note well applies, which means everything you're saying here is a contribution to the IETF, and you should note well all the policies and IPR regulations we have. And we should also be friendly to each other, which we always are, right? No, this will be a great meeting. So yes. Yes, meeting tips. You probably know this by now, but you please join at least the online tool. You can also join the full version if you want. So we have a record that you've been here, which is important for this organization to work. We do require masks, except you're actively speaking at the mic or in front here. And we do require to be nice. It's on the slide once again because it's so important. This session will be recorded and will be live streamed, so we're exciting. What is this meeting about, right? This is a good opportunity for us, the IAB, to tell you what we're doing, but it's also a great opportunity to get input from you on our work. So that's the main point here. If you're too shy to go to the mic line today and tell us what we're doing wrong, you can also send us email. There are different ways to reach us. You can reach each of us individually. You can reach me at the IAB chair, but you can also send us email to the IAB mailing list. But be aware, it's not only the IAB on that list. A few more people, so that's listed here. If you want a more public discussion, especially on architectural considerations, we have the architecture discuss list. And we have lists for each program, which is only one at this point, that you can engage with. And if especially one important role we're having is liaison coordination. So if you have a question about liaisons, they have a special mailing list for that. So feel free to reach us on any of these ways. Okay, before we start the exciting part of the meeting, we have a few updates that in order to keep you up to date with what we're doing. And one thing we are doing is we do happen to publish documents from time to time. And we published just 2 documents, which are both reports to recent workshops. So one is for the 8 workshop that we held last year, and the other one is the workshop for measuring network quality for end users. We reported in both of these workshops, really nice workshops, a lot of good contributions, and now you have the report, the final version of it, out there as RFC. We're working also on documents that are supposed to provide architecture guidance, and we have 2 documents that are basically ready for publication. The past seamless collaboration document already got a last round of community feedback, so this one is actually ready to go, and you will soon see an RFC. And the protocol maintenance, we will do another round, or like a final round of community feedback. But there was a lot of work on this document lately. So the IB thinks this document is in very good shape, and you will see an email about this soon. Or maybe it's already out, I'm not sure. And just very quickly, we also have 2 documents that we're considering to adopt in the IAB. One document we already had a presentation last IAB open meeting, so you should be aware. This is the minimization document. We got very good feedback after the session. There has been a revision, and mainly we're also clarifying what's the difference to existing privacy considerations, because that also talks about data minimization, but we believe there's more to say here. So that's the status of that document. And the other one is brand new, and I will not tell you much about it because we have a short presentation later. Okay, besides documents, we also have this tool of technical programs that we use to do work and engage with the community. And currently, we just closed recently, and that was also discussed at the last IAB open meeting. We closed the Model T working group. It doesn't mean there's no work to be done. We just think the work needs to be done in the IETF, but you can still use the architecture discussion list if you have anything to discuss in that relation. And the one active program we have is the EDM program. That program didn't have a meeting since the last IETF meeting, but there's still progress. And mainly their focus was on this protocol that I was just talking on this document I was just talking about protocol maintenance. So that's the main focus. But you can also see the current status about other things that will be or are in scope for this program based on GitHub issues. So if you're interested in these things, please look at the issues, please comment, please subscribe to the mailing list, or talk to the chairs. No, we call them leads, which is David and Tommy. David was just waving. Okay, liaison updates. We will have a slightly longer update coming up next from Russ about IEEE. This is something we started the last meeting that we actually asked one of our liaison coordinators to talk about the respective organization because we hope that is helpful to the community. And then just like one little news here, one of our tasks is also to maintain and liaison managers. So we had Alison Mencken, who served us as a liaison manager for a very long time, and great thanks for that. And she asked us to step down, and so we had to find a replacement. And so Warren is helpfully taking this up. Thank you. Thank you to both Alison and Warren. Okay, the other thing we're doing is workshops, and we actually have something coming up. The next workshop we're going to take, you just missed the deadline yesterday. But if you urgently want to contribute, maybe there's still a chance. I don't know, talk to Yari and the other program committee members. But this workshop is definitely coming up beginning of December, first week of December. This will be an online workshop. So the sessions are not fixed yet. It depends on the participants. And the focus is really on the environmental impact of the internet to try to get an assessment or a better understanding, like how to even measure that and what that means in very short. Okay, that was the quick update. And we will next go to Russ, except somebody has an agenda badge. That would be your opportunity.
Got my slides.
Oh, yeah, slides are.
Hi, I'm here to talk about the relationship between IETF and IEEE 802. Next slide, please. So this relationship has been going on for a long time, obviously, but it got written down in RFC 7241, which is actually an update to an earlier RFC, but it describes the way that the two organizations, IEEE Project 802 and the IETF, choose to cooperate. The document was collaboratively developed from both people in the IEEE 802 leadership and from the IETF leadership, and it guides the way that we do coordination today. Next slide. So each meeting cycle, both the IETF and the IEEE 802 each meet 3 times a year. And so between each of the meetings, so roughly February, June, and October, we will have kind of a coordination call to find out what's going on with the other group. So 802 will present the things that they are considering beginning work on. These are called project approval requests in their terminology. And we will talk about the BOF sessions that are coming up, just basically to make sure that each of us is aware of what's going on in the other and not surprise each other. And then we have a list of things that are of mutual interest where we want to collaborate. So each time a working group is formed or each time a project is begun on the 802 side, we ask the question, is this a thing where there's coordination needed? The further from the layer 2, layer 3 boundary you are, the less likely there'll be coordination. So if you're down at the physical layer, we're probably not going to be talking about this. If you're at the application layer, it's probably not going to be on the coordination list, but the closer you get to where the groups rub against each other, that's where we talk. It's also when new projects get started, they're shared on the new work mail list. And we basically solicit reviews on these calls as well. Hey, this topic's coming up. Make sure that you take a look at that charter. This document's become stable and we think you have an interest in it. Please review. And historically, much of the collaboration has actually fallen on individuals who participate in both groups. I don't think that's unnatural. And I think it's actually very valuable. And right now we have a couple groups that straddle that line, like the DetNet group has some dependencies on the time-sensitive networking work that is going on in 802. And there are people who are participating in both groups and making sure that the information about what one is doing is flowing to the other. Next slide, please. So the liaison managers, we have several. I provide the liaison management from the IETF to the IEEE Standards Association. Dorothy Stanley is, who's actually the chair of 802.11, was named as the liaison from the full project 802 back to the IETF, and Peter Yee for just the Wi-Fi part. The guidance regarding these when to do formal liaisons as opposed to just informal coordination from the IETF is in BCP 103, and there's a similar policy level document in 802 at that URL. And there's 2 URLs if you want to learn more about the way that the collaboration is done and the minutes from those collaboration calls and so on. Next slide. So protocol parameter allocation goes on differently in the 2 groups. IANA has to do with the way that we would allocate a parameter, and the IEEE side, they have the IEEE Registration Authority, which has a committee that oversees it called the RAC. And I always think of that and think about here in London, the RAC. But anyway, they have an oversight group that does the technical side, and we have various IANA parameter allocation policies. Whenever it's a scarce resource, of course, we require a standards action. When it's a bigger code space, we have less stringent rules. And there are some rules about, there is an OUI, the top 24 bits of a MAC address assigned, and IANA has special rules for if you need one of those, how to get one. There are a few registries that are joint use. Basically, when a document is progressing through one of the 2 bodies or the other needs a code point from the other, that's where we coordinate to make sure an assignment happens that makes sense. Next slide. So in summary, the 2 groups have a great working relationship. Informal communications between the leaders is really important because then they know each other. So whenever some friction occurs, basically they know each other, they can talk to each other. It helps a lot as opposed to the cold call. And these coordination sessions that happen 3 times a year really do help identify potential areas of collaboration or friction, The point is to identify them both as early as possible. And when we do identify a place where there is friction, we have held face-to-face meetings, either a breakfast session at an IETF or a session at an 802 meeting. And occasionally we have meetings in the same place in back-to-back weeks. And when that happens, we make sure the leadership gets to spend a little bit of time together. So again, that they know each other. Juan Carlos, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Russ. Sorry, I was trying to get on the queue, but my
Yeah, you should, but
802.11
now you're talking already.
my 802.11 connection was failed. Just want to make a comment about an example of one of those coordinations, because we've been talking through this week with RAC, with Roger and Glenn, about a specific point of coordination regarding the IEEE 802 numbering.
Okay.
And we will have some discussions at the INT area this week. So for people that are interested in seeing a real life example of one of these coordinations, we will lively discuss exactly how to best coordinate this IANA registry with the IEEE 802 registry, and some incoherences that we are finding out and some opportunities to make it work better.
Okay.
So if anyone is interested in
Yeah.
either types.
Another topic where there's been a lot of collaboration of late is on Yang modules.
Correct.
Making sure that when 802 develops one, that the Yang doctors review it and so on. So I'm glad it's working. Barry, you're in queue.
Yeah, this is Barry Leva. But just to give people an idea of how mature this is and how long it's been going on, how long have the coordination meetings been happening?
There's been 30 some of them. That's all I can remember. So at roughly
Quite some years.
yeah, exactly.
I did close the queue because we don't have a lot of time, but we take you full.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, coordination's good, but I remember the first Wi-Fi security holes being identified, and then it was like 5 years before those was fixed, and then another 15 years before they were really fixed. And I'm still trying to connect up to manage my Wi-Fi devices in the house. And I'm still not seeing solutions out of Wi-Fi world. And I think that we should not be too deferential. If a group is not delivering for the end users of the internet and not providing a specification that is actually usable, then at some point we've got to say, we're just going to do it ourselves. And if we don't say it here, somebody else will.
So there are some examples where we have done that after coordination. Like Warren had the captive portal group, which was intended to solve a small piece of that problem. And certainly I think we have other examples, but I would discourage just grabbing a space without talking, so that you know you're grabbing a particular piece of the problem. When we surprise each other is when things get most ugly.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you. That's a very good last sentence. If you have more questions about IEEE, talk to Russ, or if you have questions about liaisons, talk to us, the IAB. And we're rushing to Wes, giving us a report about one of our latest workshops.
Yep. So we just held a workshop. This will be really short because you should go watch the YouTube videos rather than listen to me try and summarize it. But we had a workshop on managing encrypted networks. I think it went off fantastically. It was sort of 3 days long. The purpose of the workshop, is there on the slide. That's sort of the most important sentence that says this workshop was to discuss how do we improve network management as encryption kind of keeps ramping and ramping up on the internet, which is both good for end users, but it does make some things like traffic prioritization and other management techniques difficult. So we divided the workshop into 3 different 2-hour sessions. They were 2 hours each day from a Monday to Wednesday. The first one was, where do we go? Where are we now? How does the world exist? What are the requirements and passive observations? The second one is, where do we want to go, right? What do we want? Where do we want to get to? What are the collaboration principles? And then the final day was on how do we get there? What are like the future thinking? How do we actually make progress? Next. So the result was an excellent 3 days, as I said. There was roughly 35 participants every day, roughly. I think it was a little bit less on each day, but it rolled a little bit. And the topics and presentations included, a lot of things. I listed sort of 4 bullets out of a bunch of stuff. There was a number of talks that were given and a lot of discussion. And they're all available on YouTube, as I said. That'll be on the next slide. But how do we, manage encrypted traffic? Sorry. How do we do this in a data center kind of world? There was actually a good talk about how it actually is being done in a data center world. What are the benefits and motivation for collaboration? And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest takeaways. How can we get end users to actually tell their ISPs what they need when they're encrypting their traffic in a way that's safe for them? So that's actually, so there was a bunch of good proposals for doing that. All right, now you can go on. So this is sort of the final list. I should say the one thing that I forgot to put on this list is thank you to the program committee. So I will do that now. The program committee, consisted of Mallory Nodal and Miria Kudwin, Tommy Polly, Russ White, and Chi Wu. So thank you to all of those members. And then the YouTube recordings are there. They're only 2 hours each, so you can put them on fast forward if you want, and you'll learn a lot from them. So I suggest you look at them.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks to all the participants for that workshop. And thanks in advance for those people who will be writing the report. So hopefully that's coming up soon. Okay, next presentation. We have Tommy, I believe. Yeah, and somehow this is not working.
All right, hello. Yeah, if you could approve the slide sharing.
Yeah, try.
Yeah, thank you.
Tommy, I can't unshare. Can you try to share, to request sharing?
I am
You
requesting. I am requesting. I think you just need to hit. Oh, it says you're offline now. Oh.
That's great. I
There
had
we
to
go.
unlock the queue. That was the secret.
Perfect. All right. Hey everyone. I'll just give a 5-minute rundown on a new document we have published. We haven't discussed it much on List yet, but this is an early preview of it. And it's talking about partitioning as an emerging architecture we see in the space of protocols that are trying to enhance privacy. And so I've been working on this with Miria as well as Chris Wood, who has been contributing as a non-IAB member. So overall, we observe that many generally newer groups within IETF are trying to improve user privacy based on separating data out between different entities. This is kind of core to what OHI is doing for Oblivious HTTP. It's one of the reasons that motivates Mask, which is doing HTTP-based proxies that can proxy UDP and IP traffic. It's very fundamental to PPM, which is a meeting going on right now about collecting metrics and splitting them up between different entities before rejoining data. And it's also fundamental to Privacy Pass, which is all about being able to authenticate or prove some property about a client using information and attestation from a different path or a different entity. So these have many different use cases, but they all benefit in a privacy aspect from partitioning. So this can be about separating out client IP addresses from the user data. It can be separating user authorization from actual content access, like in Privacy Pass, or it can be separating the client identities from metrics. So partitioning for privacy is an emerging architecture pattern that we see. So we think it's something that we should comment on and help explain, because collectively as an IETF community, we need to work on ways to discuss, analyze, and evaluate these protocols and what they have in common, because we don't think this is a pattern that's going to go away but it's something that we don't have a lot of language for already. So you can read the document. As a high level, it's talking about privacy contexts as the things that are partitioned, where a context is a group of entities that share a common view of data and metadata. And so within a context, the data and identifiers are all correlatable and all shared. And so in order to partition data, you need to split contexts, and that happens either through encryption or through literally just having separate connections over space or time. And those two building blocks are what go into making all of those different protocols that we mentioned before. So for example, in Oblivious HTTP, you end up with various different contexts of who can see what based on different encryption boundaries. This is just one of the examples we go through in the document. And so out of this, we think there are a lot of interesting observations we can make that, first, partitioning is just a tool. It's a building block that we see. It's not a panacea. It doesn't mean that you're private by default. There's a lot of reliance on non-collusion, and you have to make sure that you're selecting the boundaries of what is in your context and who is in your context very carefully to have a good effect. We talk a bit about the impacts on manageability of data. We mentioned that it's important to think about performance, and also the fact that there are still attacks that you can do by looking at traffic analysis and other patterns to understand what data is going on. So this is only part of the puzzle. So in conclusion, please read the document, provide input. This is early, but we think it's going to be an important contribution to future work in the IETF. Thank you. And if there are any questions right now, happy to hear them.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. I'll wait 2 seconds to see if anybody wants to jump in onto the mic.
We have one.
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Vittorio Bertolo, Open Exchange. I think you know what I'm going to say. But yeah, I think that, well, this is an important discussion. But then, I mean, depending on how this is deployed and designed, on the economic incentives, on the policies, and so on, technical and not technical parts of it, this might actually provoke more centralization and less privacy than actually distribute and create more privacy. So it depends whether you build this architecture in a way so that you have 1 million parts through which you can choose. I mean, but if you're just creating something which is so hard to deploy that only 3 companies on the planet will actually provide these intermediate servers or whatever, then the result will be centralization and less privacy. So I think we'll have this discussion, but I just wanted to flag the issue that it really depends on how you design and how you deploy it in terms of incentives, not just technical ones, but also economic and policy ones.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's exactly the type of commentary and discussion that belongs in this document. So it can say, hey, just because you're partitioning data doesn't mean that it's always the right thing to do, or you need to be careful in how you do it.
Okay, perfect. This document was just the 0.0 version posted. And if you want to provide more comments, you will see a call for feedback or a call. Yeah, that's kind of how we call it differently. It doesn't matter. You can comment on the architecture discuss list. Okay, let's move on.
Hey everyone, so I'm going to take over with the last half of our program today. So it's really excellent. We are about 5 minutes ahead because I think the next 2 invited talks are going to spark a lot of discussion, and it'd be also great if our presenters don't feel too rushed. So first, I'm going to ask Simone if you can come on. We've got your slides.
Yeah.
Hey, I can see you. Great. So Simone Basso is from the Open. Yeah, happy to.
So can you request sharing and select your slides, because then you can control them yourself?
I requested. Yeah, I didn't. Okay.
We
Now
uploaded your slide. That's better. Thank you.
Okay, I just did.
No problem.
Okay. So I don't see any change in the UI though. I do a
Can
select.
you just, you can re-request, or we can progress them for you.
Okay, let's see. I will re-request.
That's it.
Okay. Now something happened that actually is yeah.
You're all
Now
set.
I see my own presentation. That's cool. Okay. So let's start. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm Simone. I work at Uni. Here, what I'm going to provide you is a bird view of this report that we wrote about a surge in censorship in Iran during the first weeks of the Masa Amini protests. So let's see. Okay, I can also progress slides. Fantastic. Okay, I want first to tell you what we are. So we are a free software project. Uni is a free software project. We started in 2012, and what we do basically is to provide people with tools that they can install on their phones or on their desktops, or command line tools with which they can run tasks from the edges, from their own tools, from their own computers, to measure censorship. And then those data is submitted to us and we publish it. And since 2012, we covered more than 200 countries and published more than 1 billion measurements. And yeah, the way in which many users interacts with the tool is that it's a mobile app or a desktop app where you can choose categories of tasks to run. So for example, in this presentation, I'm going to show you results from the websites kind of task where there is a set of URLs that we choose and that we basically we check for when the test is running, but we also test instant messaging apps by checking services that are relevant to them. So those are the two most important group of tests that we are going to discuss. Then like what happens is that users runs the Uniprobe tool and then submit measurements to our backend, which is the gray thing in there. And then eventually we have an API to access the measurements, and there is a website called UniExplorer which allows to see individual measurements or to group measurements together, produce charts, etc. And that creates value for researchers, including us, and users that want to explore all of that. In particular, we have this tool called MAT, Measurement Aggregation Toolkit, which allows anyone to produce charts, and those charts basically are the charts that I'm going to use, that we used in the original report. So that's the tool, and yeah, you can basically reproduce the charts that I'm going to show for yourself using this tool. So now that I have set the stage, let's enter into the report itself. /reports on our website is the directory where we publish all our reports. The specific one that I'm going to tell you the high-level results of is this one on on Iran. After a few weeks after the beginning of the protest, we actually finished it on the 25th of September. And so let's before I show you some of our results, let's say that as you probably already know, there was lots of censorship in Iran before, and there were few services that were available. And the TLDR of this report is that the situation became worst, quite worst. But still, it's important to remember the starting point was not good at all. So let's, for example, start to see one of the charts that we included into the report. This is about DNS over HTTPS, and there are rows in this chart. Each row is a service that you can use to do DOH, and then each bar is the height of each bar is the number of measurements we collected in a single day in Iran. And then there are those colors. It's a stat plot, so basically the amount of a color that you see is the percentage of that color on that day. Okay, green is obvious, so nothing to say here. Then we have these two colors that are red and yellow. And red is confirmed. What this means is that there are signatures we and other people doing research in this field has collected over time that you can find, for example, in HTTP bodies or in the DNS replies that are a clear indication of censorship. And when we see those signatures, the measurement is flagged as confirmed. Now, in the case of Iran, where Iran has many private IP addresses inside the country, and there are a few of these bogons that are well known to be associated with censoring. So when we, in this specific case, when we found those bogons, we said, right, okay, this measurement really looks a direct attempt of censoring. Then yellow is mostly unexpected network errors. So cases that you will see in Iran are most often you perform a TLS handshake, but you time out during the handshake. And there is some filtering that depends on the client law or the endpoints that you're using that cause the handshake to time out. Or another case that is frequent in Iran is that you TCP connect, but you time out because the connect never terminates. So those are the yellow cases that we see here. Like without going too much in depth, but just to say that we know by inspecting the measurements that what we had was a superimposition of anomalies and confirmed. So for example, you see that there are these 3 services that were already failing with anomalies, and those anomalies were mostly TLS handshakes. Now, it turned red, it turned to confirmed on the 21st. And this is basically the pattern. So we can see the same pattern across other kind of services. So WhatsApp was working before, and this is notable because Signal, for example, was tampered with in Iran before, and also Telegram was, and WhatsApp instead was working. And here we have a bunch of services that are relevant to WhatsApp, and they, on the 21st again, turned yellow, starting having anomalies. The same happened for Instagram, which was one of the few social networks that was still working in the country. And again, on the 21st, those many services that are useful to Instagram, they became basically anomalies. So mostly TLS handshake timing out. So about stores, the stores, like for both Apple and Google's Play Store, what happened is that it started not working a few days later. And what happened is that the censorship was mainly targeting the services that are useful to install applications, but the rest was working. So for example, here for the App Store, after a certain hour of the 22nd, all tests start failing and providing these confirmed results. And the same happened for the Play Store, where play.googleapps.com seems to be very important for installing new applications. And yeah, the rest was mostly working, but yeah, this prevented people from installing applications. And finally, LinkedIn, similar story, but shifted a little bit in time. After a certain moment in time, it started not working. So to summarize, on top of an already big censorship condition, people from Iran started not being able to use DNS over HTTPS, which reduced their opportunities to get good IP addresses. And then the instant messaging tool that was working started having issues. And then social networks such as LinkedIn and Instagram were not working anymore. And stores from which you can install tools like Siphon or Lantern or Tor to circumvent circumvention, they were not working anymore. So basically, yeah, this is what we observed at the beginning of the protests. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Simona. So we're going to wait until the end of our invited talks are finished for questions. And so we'll go ahead and invite Masa up. So Masa works at the Article 19, which is, just for disclosure purposes, I used to work there as well. She's also a senior researcher in the MENA region at the University of Oxford as a PhD candidate. So we're really excited to have her come up to talk more about what activists are seeing on the ground as folks are actually dealing with these shutdowns. And we also have her slides. So we're going to we've given you a little bit of a more technical view of what the shutdowns are looking like. And this is just more of the real human side of things as well. And so I'll, let Masa go ahead. And you can just let us know what to change.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone.
You can take it out if you want.
Okay. Yeah, like Mallory said, I work at Article 19. I'm a senior researcher focusing on the MENA region. And for the past 7 weeks, I guess our teams working on Iran have been full on working on this issue. Some people call this a revolution because things have changed drastically, and it's a bit unprecedented to see a protest movement like this continue on for such a long period of time. And technology obviously plays a really big role. So the last time we saw something on this scale was back during November of 2019 in Iran. Of course, protests have been continuous. Even before this round, there were protests in different provinces over different issues like, water crises, food crises, and things like that. And every time there are internet disruptions and there is some sort of restrictions on access online. So the largest scale of shutdowns we saw was during November 2019. And so for a period of over a week, the entire country kind of essentially went offline from the international internet. There was access to, national internet services. And so, some of you might have heard of November 2019 in terms of what they did. Clearly, the digital repression was accompanied by, offline severe brutality. The difficulty in documenting how many people were killed in the darkness of the shutdowns has been obviously has meant that we don't know the exact figures. Amnesty International has verified something around 300 people who have died, but estimates say that they're actually closer to 1,500 people were killed by authorities while protesting. And there's been a lot of research by Article 19 and Amnesty International to show that these crimes against life were largely facilitated by internet shutdowns. So these technical discussions have very real impact on just the right to life and the right to protest in Iran. So at Article 19, we did really in-depth research to kind of look at the anatomy of what happened during 2019. Even though there was a kind of international shutdown, there wasn't kind of an off switch. And so there's a map behind me of what the internet looked like in 2019 in terms of how ISPs were organized. So basically what we see is there wasn't necessarily a centralization in how the internet was shut off, but there has been a centralization in terms of how ISPs are organized. And so most civilian connections, if you can see up there in the blue, originate from the Telecommunications Infrastructure Company of Iran. And so there is, a communication regulatory authority that tells the various ISPs what kind of restrictions they have to place on their users. And so, the level of shutdowns occurred really at the ISP levels in that way. And so, our research did indicate that despite, the centralization in governance, there hasn't necessarily been a centralization in infrastructure. After 2019, there were continued growth in, internet exchange points, facilitating more connections to the international internet. So despite the fact that, there has been a lot of talk about how Iran is trying to nationalize its internet or move towards a kind of North Korean national internet infrastructure, it is still, investing in international connections, so that's interesting. So this brings me to what's happening now. Next slide. So there were a lot of lessons learned from 2019 in terms of what these shutdowns did for the Iranian economy. Clearly, there were billions of dollars lost to the Iranian economy in 2019 when there was a week-long shutdown from the international internet. And so, like every kind of protest crisis that has occurred in this country, there has been a period of very deep thought and development by authorities in terms of lessons learned. And 2019 was one of these periods. And so one of the reflections was how to make digital repression essentially more efficient and less costly for the government. And one of the means that really was developed was the policies and technical underpinnings of this particular bill that's called the User Protection Bill, or in Persian it's called Tarh Siyanat. And of course, the User Protection Bill is not necessarily to protect Iranian users. It's more to protect Iranian authorities and really leave Iranian users vulnerable. And so there are a number of different, draconian articles within this bill. This bill is so unpopular that even really conservative hardline elements in Iran, like Iran's, student Basij forces have protested this bill. And, student Basij are some of the most hardline authoritarian groups in Iran. And so there's deep unpopularity about the bill because it's going to severely hurt the economy. However, this hasn't stopped the fact that there has been a silent implementation of a lot of the policies in the bill. And one of there's a lot of different elements, from the fact that they want to centralize internet exchange points into the hands of the armed forces. But one of the points in the bill that has been particularly significant, and our colleagues at UNI also pointed out to, is this element where they want to criminalize the sale of VPNs and essentially technically disable the use of VPNs. And they want to build a kind of model of legal VPNs where the government facilitates different tiers of access to different individuals in Iran based on their profession, based on their identity or connections, to have these legal VPNs that essentially gives, white lists for internet access, as opposed to, the blacklist that currently exists. And so how does the government go about technically disabling access to VPNs? And so at Article 19, we had been trying to understand how this is happening. And so as far back as October 2021, we started seeing evidence of, very sophisticated development of this kind of technology. So during October 2021, there wasn't necessarily any protests in Iran. There wasn't necessarily any events, but there was severe disruptions occurring on the Iranian network. And so when we did a deep dive into it and talked to network engineers inside Iran, it seemed like there was, a specific focus on tampering and disconnecting VPN protocols. And so there's actually, a testimony from a network engineer we spoke to, where he was saying that basically the health of the network was severely deteriorating at that point as they were testing these different forms of what seemed like deep packet inspection against these circumvention methods. So it did seem like they were really working on this effort. If you go to the next slide. And of course, this now brings us to right now. So since September 16, when Mahsa or Jina Amini died after being in custody with the morality police, we immediately saw protests. They started at her hospital in Tehran on the 16th, and they spread to be national protests by the 17th, and they've basically continued on until right this very minute. And so this is pretty historic and unprecedented in terms of the length of protests, and the various different techniques we have seen are very new, and I think talk to the fact that authorities had been planning for a moment like this and planning on these different methods to try to reduce the kind of costs to the economy, to how the nation functions. And so there's been really four techniques we've been noticing. Mobile curfews. Iran, like a lot of countries, internet access is mostly facilitated through mobile internet data. And so it's very significant. And protests typically surge around 4 p.m., between 4 p.m. and 1 a.m. And so the major, if you go to the next slide, some of the major mobile carriers in Iran. Up here we have Irancell, Raitel, and Hamra Avva. These are the most used mobile carriers in Iran. And you can see by this period of time during these protests, we have clear moments where, there's mobile curfews. And, after the mobile curfews, and we can see a surge in mobile use. Next slide. And so another thing we've been seeing, although we haven't been seeing national shutdowns, we've been seeing, select days where internet is shut down in specific regions where there's the highest protest brutality. This is a snippet from one day from October 8th to the 9th in the province of Kurdistan. Masa Amini was from Kurdistan, so there's been a lot of days like this where the internet is shut, and other provinces where historically marginalized groups like the Baluchis, the Ahwazis, and the Kurds have been seeing a lot of days like this, and accompanied usually by massacres. So like I mentioned, I think the biggest and most concerning aspect we're seeing is how they are attacking circumvention technology at the moment. And of course, this is really important because, within the first few days of the protests, most remaining and most popular foreign internet services were blocked. So Instagram was the most used social media in Iran. It was blocked within a few days of the protests. WhatsApp was blocked within the first few days of the protests, and slowly most, as our colleagues at UNI said, most foreign services, or really any kind of foreign service where communication or coordination could occur, has been blocked. And so this also is part of the overall plans that were in place for the bill. And not only did they do this, but they blocked the app stores. So when they blocked app stores like Google Play Store and Apple App Store, this means that when the existing VPNs are disabled, it's very hard. There's a new hurdle in getting new functional and secure VPNs. Iran is well known for having national VPNs that are well known to be operated by authorities who monitor or pick up data from the VPNs that they make themselves. So secure VPNs is a major issue, and we have noted that there's a large majority of Iranians are using kind of national VPNs where the security is very shady. And so, like I mentioned, and like our UNI colleagues also alluded to, there has been different kind of evidences of what they're doing to make circumvention really difficult. So, we're guessing there's very sophisticated deep packet inspection. We've also seen increased blocking of encrypted DNS and, complete blocking of HTTP3 and quick traffic. I'm not a particularly, technical person into the fine graining of this, but I'm sure a lot of people in this room are aware of this. So these are some of the things that we've been seeing. Next slide. So this essentially brings us to what can be done. I mean, you might have been following the most, I guess, headline grabbing solution to what's been happening in Iran, which is, Elon Musk saying he's going to send Starlink to Iran. This, seems like, a perfect solution, I guess, an ideal, but it is a little bit unclear how the security and safety of that would work in terms of how uplink connections for satellite internet would be detected and would lead to severe offline repression of anyone with Starlink in Iran. What I do think the focus should be is on circumvention technology. So how do we develop tools to address what Iran is doing? There's been, Mallory was noting, she was reading a report about how there's been imports of this kind of technology from China to really advance what they're doing to attack circumvention tools. And so how should we be helping Iranians kind of join this battle against very sophisticated attacks, sophisticated anti-censorship attacks? And so there's, I think, a lot of different things that can be done. One of the things that we have been looking at is the opportunities that have been made available with a particular law in the United States, which is tech sanctions have been loosened at the start of this protest. So the US Treasury basically added cloud computing and cloud platforms to technologies that can legally now be made available to Iran. So things like GCP, Google Cloud platforms, are at the moment blocked in Iran from the Google side. And of course, things like GCP can easily, join the roster of tools meant for fighting internet censorship. And I mean, one of the things I've noted is that, Google, well, the Jigsaw made Outline VPN, for example, it relies on other servers to be hosted or used in Iran. And so this Google VPN itself cannot even rely on GCP infrastructure, it has to rely on DigitalOcean infrastructure, which consequently also was legally, because of the change in regulation, it could legally be available in Iran. Technically, GCP can be now legally made available in Iran, but Google has been slow to make this change. So that's one of the things we have been focused on in terms of ensuring that things like Google and Amazon and Microsoft can, adjust to these new regulations and help in this fight. Of course, all of these cloud providers could have facilitated circumvention tech through domain fronting. Some of you might know in 2018, domain fronting was closed down. There's a wide array of reasons, I guess, for why this was closed down. But at the time, there was a push to work with these companies so that they would basically stop complying with the sanctions that blocked their services in Iran. And make domain fronting functional. Most famously, Signal used the Google App Engine for its circumvention strategy. But of course, that was disbanded when domain fronting was disabled by all three companies. And so these are some of the recommendations that we have. I'm sure a group full of engineers and technologists would have more recommendations. And I hope all your expertise can help join this battle for internet freedom in Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Masa. So we do have a bit of time if folks want to get in the queue and share all of your ideas for how to do circumvention better, or other comments or questions you might have.
Phil Humbaker, I'd like to listen. I want to know all your requirements in depth, as much information as possible. I think in terms of the standards process, we have to think in terms of two buckets, in that anything we do is going to be subject to counter circumvention. And, there was the old thing of one war, one rifle. And so as soon as we had Tor and the original democracy protests after the stolen election in Iran, they basically worked out how to get through Tor. And then we saw the attacks on DigiNotar and my company at the time, Komodo, that came out of that. I think that we need to think of two separate tracks. One, developing cryptographic security technologies, and the second of which is steganographic technologies. In that you're not going to be able to standardize the anti-circumvention technology. That's going to have to be something that's agile and keeps changing and responding to the adversary. However, the cryptographic technology, there we can provide you with some building blocks that should help go through then the steganography can operate on. And Quick's one start on that. I've got a slightly more hard-boiled traffic analysis resistant approach. We can maybe go further, but that might be how we can kind of like do a standards component that is reusable, but there's always going to have to be some tactical development on the steganographic front.
Yep, Piers.
Go ahead.
Hi, Hi, I think just mentioned, just Tor wasn't explicitly mentioned in these slides here, but it seems traditionally being a place where Tor is used, and it's still used like right now. I mean, if you look on the Tor website, there's a sort of a fair number of users who are still using it. There are certain kind of connection techniques, transports that have been blocked, but not all of them have, like Snowflake and OBS v4 and all that are possible. But as you say, it's like a continual battle. So anyway, yeah.
Go ahead, Lars.
Lars Eggert, so first those were two great talks. Thank you for inviting them and thank you for coming and talking to us. So Philip said some interesting things, and I think sort of there is a role for the IETF here, but it's or the IRTF here, but it's not necessarily like standardizing anything, right? But there are people that are sort of looking at machine generating circumvention techniques. I think we might have even given an applied networking research prize a while ago, right? So those things, but basically try to learn about weaknesses in the inspection and blocking technologies by creatively using our protocols and you know, basically playing with the headers, playing with the packet traces to confuse those boxes, right? And it's an arms race, so the standard doesn't make sense. But a forum for discussing this, like bringing people together to build these evasion techniques with the people that understand the protocols very deeply, might be an interesting experiment.
That's right. I think we're kind of riffing off each other, which is great, because I got in the queue to talk a little bit about what I've seen, also to point people to a draft that is in the privacy research group on censorship techniques. So that was also noted over the course of its development, maybe 7 years, that it changes all the time. But it's useful to write it down. It's useful to talk about it. I think that we do have examples of work that IETF does on maybe standardizing frameworks within which people work. I don't know a lot about Yang, but I get the idea that that's kind of what it's about. And I would say that the work that the community has done, so sort of the civil society community, the folks that are really trying to keep the internet on for everybody all over the world, there are definitely two strong camps. There are those that measure the censorship, like Uni and Simona and others. And then there are the folks that are building tools or tool bridges or things like that to actually respond to exactly the thing that you've all identified, which is that it's a moving target. And what some of those things are called, it's a general bucket. It doesn't necessarily mean any one specific tool. It's pluggable transports, where you have things like, you know, Tor maybe doesn't work, but something like Snowflake is sitting on top of Tor to help people get on it better. And then once you're on the network, then it's harder to be, it's harder for your traffic to be seen and things like that. So that work happens. I think it would be great actually to have it happen in the IETF, or to figure out how to bring that community here more often so that they can get the critical feedback from you all who are simultaneously developing whole protocols like quick, but then also might be swept up in this problem where just the protocol itself is getting blocked. Something I think is fairly a new trend in censorship is to just block things based on protocol. That's new. We don't want that to happen. So how can we also mitigate that issue? So yeah, anyway, thanks so much, Masa, for coming. Thanks everyone for your feedback and attendance. And I think we're closing out the IAB meeting for this session. Thanks. Really nice. It's perfectly on time as well. Thank you for all your work getting all the slides together. I like totally misplaced my charger, which is such a rookie thing to do.